I get this question a lot, right? Which is, how did you get into esports and how can I get into esports, essentially? People out there really want to work in esports because they think that it's an awesome job. I enjoy it. It's a fucking awesome job for me. But they don't seem to know what to do. Like, I get so many comments, or not comments, but mostly DMs on Twitter and stuff, like, oh, is there a school that I need to go to or something like that? I don't know of anybody that went to a school for esports. Most of the time, the people that are in esports are just because they enjoyed doing esports stuff so much that they started making it or like being part of the community themselves and just and then got hired, because at some point, if you're making good content, people will want to have that content themselves, and then they have to pay for it. Anyway, so I've drawn out a timeline here that's roughly my path through esports of what I did up until this point in 2019. So when I was in high school, must have been about 15. Actually, does that even match up with the years? I guess in 2011 I must have been 16 at least. 16 going on 17. And I was playing TF2, just this game that my friend liked. And from playing on kind of custom servers and stuff like that, and realizing that you could have some competition and there was like leaderboards and stuff, wasn't really any team aspect to it. It was just leaderboards. I was like, oh well, why don't we try and play with our team against another team? Like we frequented some pub servers, some other people frequented some other pub servers, so we were like, oh, let's challenge them to a game. So then we were looking up what the rules would be, or if anyone had done that before. Can you imagine, in 2011, we were asking ourselves deadly seriously, I wonder if anyone has ever played competitive video games against each other before, like in like a structured setting with rules and stuff. Papagas. But that's what everybody goes through, I suppose, just figuring out that it is even a thing, especially at that time, because it was fairly new. I mean, this was before the days of Twitch being enormous. But anyway, I invented esports, essentially, is what I'm saying. No, so after having looked that up, we were like, oh shit, there's an entire TF2 league out there. There's a whole system of matches and a website that you can sign up to and that kind of shit. So in 2011, I can't exactly remember when, and honestly, I may have even got the year wrong. It might have been 2010 or even 2012 by the time I started on my first TF2 team. I could look it up on ETF2L, but I can't be bothered. I joined the TF2 team and was just kind of figuring out how that went. Wasn't really interested in video games outside of TF2, just kind of binge watched that. Then at some point much later in the year, so this at this point must have been 2012 or maybe even going on 2013, I started watching CSGO because a couple of my mates that I played TF2 with really enjoyed CSGO, enjoyed watching it. And so I watched it a little bit and I was like, okay, I kind of figure out like how this game works. I downloaded it, I played the game a little bit. And then I was following some of the tournaments. Then from those tournaments, I realized that some of the personalities within there were making a bunch of esports content. And it was like the perfect kind of content if you want to get into the game. Like Thorin would do stuff, especially back in those days, Thorin would do a lot of stuff about players and about tournaments and about, I don't know, a bunch of different shit. But then he also had about 100 videos that were, or maybe even more than that, maybe he had 200 at that point, that hadn't been, that were kind of from previous as well. So if you wanted to know about the history of some player or whatever, you could just watch one of those videos. So I would watch CSGO casually on the side while still playing TF2. At this point in 2014, I was on probably, I think it was like the 4th best European team, something like that. Maybe we were slightly higher than that. I can't exactly remember. And I was asked to cast TF2 because I was one of the only English players on top teams that hadn't, like, the way that casting in TF2 worked was they tried to broadcast every match, a bit like the Overwatch League. I'd say there's a few less matches than the Overwatch League per day. And they try and broadcast maybe, honestly, I think there was normally like 2 matches a night, and maybe there was like three nights a week, something like that. I want to say it was something like that. And they constantly needed people casting because it wasn't a job. No one got paid for it. So they were just in constant need of people to actually talk over the games. And then they broadcast it on Twitch. So I was asked to cast. I'd obviously watched a bunch of casting in TF2 before and watched a bunch in CSGO. So I kind of knew how it worked. But I wasn't particularly good. I just understood the teams and knew all of that stuff. And I was super nervous when I started, actually, as well. I remember my teeth chattering when I was casting my first game. It was only to like 4 people as well. So yeah, I essentially got asked to cast because it was the similar kind of stuff that goes on with maybe the tier 2 or tier 3. It's more to do with like the tier 3 scene, like open division, trials, stuff like that inside of the Overwatch League, where the games being broadcast would be a good thing, but they don't necessarily have all of the people always to be able to do it, so they're always looking for people to be able to broadcast the games, but it doesn't get paid. But the viewership was... Actually, I have no idea what the fucking viewership is for Contenders. Not for Contenders, but for like Trials and Open Division. Maybe Overwatch does actually get a few hundred for those games, but somehow I kind of doubt it. But yeah, so first time, pretty shit, but I just carried on because I enjoyed it, and I liked the idea of being on the mic and trying to improve that as a skill. So I was in medical school at the same time, but started to get, from this point onwards, once I'd first been asked to cast TF2, I got more and more involved with the behind-the-scenes stuff. So I would... There's always a guy that has to organize who's running the camera, because we only used to run one observer. So we'd have who's observing the game, who's producing the game. Sometimes those were separate people, sometimes they were the same. Who are the two casters? So I would get more involved into like figuring out, who was casting, trying to cast as many games as possible, learning a little bit more about how to cast and getting comfortable with the role. Then I started writing some news articles as well. Again, all unpaid work, just because somebody needed to do it and I could write, so why not? Looked around other esports websites to try and feel like what the feel of news articles should be, then just tried to basically copy the style of that and reproduce it. Then I ran a couple of tournaments. Again, was like trying to liaise with a couple of sponsors fairly unsuccessfully. Sponsor work is not my forte by any stretch of the imagination. And it was also very difficult in TF2 to be able to know what your viewership is even worth, because no one really gave a fuck about TF2. So you were lucky if you get like a 1K sponsorship for one of the biggest LAN events. So yeah, it was a bit weird that kind of time trying to figure out what it was. But again, anything that I did, like when I casted, I would watch a bunch of different casts and try and figure out how casting worked. When I was writing news articles, I'd go and find a load of news articles and figure out like what the format is, how they should be formatted, read a load of things on news articles or journalism or stuff like that, like best practice kind of stuff, ethics, these kind of things. When I was running tournaments, I would watch a butt ton of... I mean, this comes later, the kind of time where I was diving super deep into a bunch of esports content. But generally, like with the tournament things, I'd try and watch... what even was that? Like the esports talk show that Thorin ran at one point, which was... He'd invite people like Noah Winston and Carmack on and stuff like that, and they'd discuss kind of how the scenes worked and what the tournament circuits were like and how much money people were expected to gain from sponsorships and where the return on investment came in from. Yeah, Esports Salon, that was it. So I would watch a bunch of content around that to try and figure out like how are tournaments monetized, what are people even looking for, how do you market them effectively, that kind of stuff. Just because I found it really interesting, the whole ecosystem. So this entire process up to the beginning of 2016 was just knowledge gathering, was just 2 years, maybe 2.5 years of just solid knowledge gathering. And then I got kicked out of university and was like, oh fuck, I wonder if I can try and make this esports thing full time. So I was trying to do some stuff with TF2, but I also saw Overwatch on the horizon and was like, maybe we'll be able to get a shot in Overwatch. I can maybe leverage like, I don't know, I can write news articles, or I can try and run some tournaments, or maybe if I'm lucky, I'll get an opportunity to cast, this kind of stuff. So, but while I was kicked out of uni and didn't really have that much to do, I was living on my savings, doing news articles and stuff like that. And I watched and listened to a dumb amount of esports content. Like, I've watched every video, or up until that point, I'd watched every video that Thorin had ever put out, every video interview that Richard Lewis had ever put out, everything that Monty had produced, A bunch of stuff that Carmack had done in interviews. Who else was I listening to? I don't know. Some of the other League of Legends people. Like, I didn't so much spend that much time watching esports as listening to the people around esports and trying to listen to what they had to say and how they got good. Like, Richard Lewis recommended maybe 4 or 5 different books for people who are trying to get into esports journalism, although I think he seems to hate that term. He just thinks of himself as a journalist that happens to do esports stuff. But yeah, he recommended a bunch of books, so I went and read a bunch of those books and then applied to a lot of different websites. Actually, this isn't even in here, but I applied to a bunch of different websites to write news articles for any game that they had. So I applied to like Dignitas used to do things, and who the fuck else? Na'Vi, I wrote some articles for, which I don't think I've ever talked about, but I wrote some articles for Na'Vi, just news articles, recap stuff. Who else? I can't even remember. There was like Frag something? I don't know. But basically as well, whenever I gave my resume to those guys, because when you apply for the positions, normally they ask you, like, have you ever written stuff before? And I would be able to give them maybe 50 news articles I wrote for TFTV, plus some opinion pieces that I wrote for TFTV and The Spire, plus the fact that I ran some tournaments and tried to liaise with sponsors, and that I casted for a while. And so they were really impressed. They were, because most people that apply for esports jobs that are unpaid like that, I mean, no, actually, those were just starting to be paid. Those kind of jobs were like paid a pittance. I paid like $5 an article or something like that, maybe $10 an article. So they were like, why are you applying when you have this much experience? I was like, well, I can't fucking do anything else. So, which I always find weird that people, like, this was my first attempt at finding a paid esports job, was finding some like $10 shit, apart from what I'd done on my stream or my YouTube. But that was what I was attempting to do, was actually monetize myself writing news articles for different websites. And I was fine doing it anywhere, like Overwatch, Dota, CS. I started in CS, actually. I was doing recap articles for CS. I think I made like fucking $30 or something before I realized that it was not worth the effort, because a lot of those sites as well are coded with horrible, like, botched WordPress that, like, all of the formatting is fucking appalling, that kind of stuff. And then I also made some content as well. I've got like a little branch off here because I made some YouTube content. Like, I made an On The Point interview series just to try and test out whether I could do interviews in the future, which, you know, I seem to have actually quite a bit of a talent for being able to do interviews, because I had a lot of experience and knowledge about these players, and I can keep a conversation flowing. So I found that fairly simple. So then my plan of attack was, actually, I haven't written this down as well. This was a fucking huge deal. So this was the number one thing for me making it full time in esports. A site called over.gg, which was run by the same people as TFTV. So TFTV was run by Enigma, a guy from TF2, and he went over to Overwatch and ported the website, essentially. I mean, it was a very similar website. And his idea was to produce a bunch of written coverage, like recaps and shit, and maybe some original content as well, and host streamers and have a forum there and this kind of stuff, and try and use the formula for TFTV, which was a crazy popular hub of Team Fortress, and try and make that like the Overwatch hub as well. Benchmob, thank you for the 6 months. So, over.gg was my first. So the reason that I stopped trying to, well, I'm saying we'll listen to a bunch of esports content. That's when I also was applying for these other websites doing CSGO recaps. The reason I stopped applying for those jobs is because I got a job with over.gg doing news articles and written articles and stuff like that. And the payment system was roughly like, it's like a pittance for news recaps, but they're really easy to produce, so you can just pump them out and earn a bit of money that way. If you want to produce some like interviews or feature content or this kind of stuff that gets more clicks, then it's maybe twice as much for that. And then for some really like long form, lot of effort or video pieces or stuff where I go to an event and record interviews with them, they pay me a little bit more than that as well. So at this point, I was kicked out of uni, working for Over.gg, and I decided, I mean, this is a bit of a misnomer saying Overwatch full time, because I had dick all else to do in my life. I absolutely was not going to take a real life job. I decided that was a fucking dumb idea, because I was just coasting up until my savings ran out, and I figured I had like a year to try and make it in Overwatch. And so the way I was thinking about it was, I have a year of savings to try and make it in a brand new game where, in theory, as somebody who was at the top of casting TF2 by this time, I should be in a position where I can leverage that at least to do something in Overwatch, because I knew a bunch of the players that were going into it from TF2. I had a leg up on the competition. I didn't have a leg up on all of the competition because, like, some of the people like Jason Kaplan and Mitch were working for ESL, and ESL were going to run tournaments. Some of the people like Hex and ZP already knew the guys from Gosu Gamers, and they were running tournaments. There were people like Fishsticks and Seltzer and Huck who knew people from Blizzard who were casting the first LANs that were happening as well. So certainly didn't have a leg over them, but I at least had a leg over just some random coming into a game. And I think the most important thing to think about in terms of overall esports is this period of time, because what happened was I had a great lucky opportunity in that I had already been working for a website unpaid for years, had been working for this website which was now ready to monetize. So this was a great opportunity that, like, because I'd put in some hard work over the last couple of years, I was now in an opportunity to walk into, okay, not a well-paying job, but at least it was some money for doing esports stuff. It was my first paid gig. So this was a huge opportunity, but also the fact that I got in at the beginning, like at ground zero. If you're not getting in at ground zero of a video game, I don't know how the fuck you get in, honestly. Because, like, if you wanted to get in now, there are so many people doing what you do. You gotta be so much better than they are. Otherwise, you're really going to struggle to get noticed. So, unless you are really, really good or are determined that you are going to get really, really good, it's so difficult to try and penetrate a game when it's already been out for a couple of years. So, I mean, if I had to be real, almost my best advice to someone trying to get into Overwatch right now would be, if you are starting at this point and you haven't built up, say, a bunch of years working for a different website, or your resume doesn't look that impressive, like you don't have that much experience, start here. And I don't mean with TF2, but I mean start writing news or something unpaid whilst also doing a different job. Like, this was my time in med school from here to here, so that was what I was doing full time. But you gotta do some shit and just think, what is the next big game? Like, you're looking for the next big game to come out, and you're gonna hop on that big game. Or you're looking for an opportunity down the road, but it's important that you need to build the skills and the resume to be able to go forward. Because I was dog shit here and dog shit here. By the time I got to here, I was fairly competent at casting and writing news and doing interviews and stuff like that. So you just need the time to be able to get better, I think. Or at least I did, because I was crap. Anyway, so once I had a job with Over.gg, and I was doing Overwatch full-time, as in writing news articles and stuff like that full-time, I was trying to get to know the players as well that were big in Overwatch. So the best way of getting to know players is by doing interviews with them and doing voice interviews, because you don't learn anything about somebody. If you do an interview over a written interview with somebody, I'm not going to remember your name, probably. You're gonna pop up on, like, my emails or whatever, and I might remember your name in like 6 months' time or something. But we haven't really developed any rapport. Whereas when I was doing, like, I did some interviews with Zebasai and Soon, and I already knew Zebasai because I'd played with and against him a bunch and used to play TF2 pugs with him all the time. But then just from talking to Soon now knows who I am and knows that Zebasai knows who I am and stuff like that. It's all about, like, getting the brand out there. And also, just when you do a spoken interview, there's more opportunity to be friendly with people and to have a bit of a joke and to let them know that you know stuff about them. So, yeah. So voice interviews, really important for being able to do that kind of stuff. And also just talking to players about other players. I would write news articles about roster changes and stuff like that, because I would talk to players and they would say like, oh, you know, I think this team's going to make a roster move, and then I'd look around and I'd talk to the player and see like what they were up to and this kind of stuff, and eventually you're able to kind of discern what's going on. You have your fingers in enough pies, and that's also good for being able to just get out there and talk to people. So then, after I'd gone into Overwatch full time, we knew somebody, Dashner knew somebody who was running iBuyPower. I think it was like the fuck were they called? Sevo or something? I think they were like, I think Dashner had worked with Sevo in CSGO, and so he was in a position to be able to recommend talent for this iBuyPower summer event. Oh, they're now Gfinity. Huh, that's interesting. So these guys were happy with me, Bren, and Bloodsire casting this small event for them. I was mad unprepared for this. We all were mad unprepared for it, looking back as well. It was right at the beginning of the game. It was our first opportunity to cast. If you wanted to do practice casts, you had to cast over the top of VODs that had like other people talking in them. Really fucking difficult to practice cast in Overwatch. Always has been. The replay viewer is the first thing that's going to make it much easier to cast in Overwatch. So I casted this event. It wasn't that great, but some people from Blizzard after this event got in touch with us over Twitter. Got in touch with me and Bren, and Bloodsire as well, actually. And they were like, oh, I saw your casting. It was pretty good. We'll let you know if there's anything you can do in the future. Now, I've never actually told anybody this, I think. But when I was doing Tip of the Hats, which was about here on this timeline, it was in maybe September, October. So this happened in July. The next event that I went to was DreamHack Winter in 2016 in fucking... No, actually, the first one I went to was this. MSI MGA. I think that was before DreamHack Winter. But anyway, the timeline might be a bit messed up. But basically, these events are all in December. So this range here is all December 2016. Before that, though, they got in touch with me and Bloodsire, because it was me, Bloodsire, and Bren who were casting this event. There was three of us. Some people from Blizzard got in touch with me and Bloodsire, and they were like, do you want to cast Tespa? Would you like to go and cast Tespa? And I was like, oh, that'd be great, but you do know that I live in the UK, right? And they were like, oh, fuck. So they didn't realize that I was a UK resident. So me and Bloodsire, and also Bloodsire was working full time as well, so he couldn't really dip out. He could only do tournaments every now and then. So that fell to pieces. Couldn't do that. But then I went, then after that, honestly, I can't remember which way around these were. I think MSI MGA was first. MSI MGA came up, and because it was hosted in London, and they were looking for somebody from the UK, they got in touch with me. I think probably because... Actually, I'm not sure. But I think it was probably because I'd done the iBuyPower summer event, but it might have been just because I'd been casting and doing YouTube stuff and this kind of shit. Because I was also producing some YouTube videos at this time just to try and get my face out there, some analysis, some over.gg articles, this kind of thing. So I'd been pumping out content. So my name was, kind of known. And I lived in the same country as this event was going on. So it was only like a 2-hour train ride for me to be able to get down to there. So I went down to MSI MGA, and the idea was it was ZP, Hex, me, and Mitch, I think. Yeah. So ZP and Hex were going to cast, and me and Mitch were going to cast, and whoever was not casting was going to be on the desk with Zoe, I think. Zoe was going to run the desk. So, yeah, so I did go to DreamHack Winter first, I think. I can't remember anyway. Can't remember. Yeah. MSI was after DreamHack Winter. Yeah, okay. So I went to DreamHack Winter first, and I met Mitch, and I met Hex, and ZP, I think, as well, but I don't actually remember meeting ZP. And DreamHack Winter, I was there just to do interviews. So I did YouTube interviews, in-person interviews with like a dictaphone that I'd bought, that I would use to interview the players. So the audio got saved on this dictaphone to an SD card, and then I'd combine it with the video afterwards. And I did the first in-person interviews that anyone had done in Overwatch, actually. And they did relatively well. They were pretty good. They got like a few thousand views on a YouTube channel that nobody had previously watched. They got pretty decent on Reddit. There was some traction. I interviewed Swoosh, I think, first, and then Zebasai saw the interview that I did with Swoosh, and he wanted to be interviewed because Swoosh had called him out. And then I did an interview with Zappis and did an interview with some of the other guys as well. I can't exactly remember. Cool Matt, I remember. I think Vonathil, but it might have been Raptor as well. But yeah, I did like these interviews at DreamHack Winter and wrote some articles as well. So then I went to this MSI MGA event, and Bren came with me because Bren was also trying to make his name in Overwatch. And because I was casting, he decided to do what I had been doing at DreamHack. So he was going to do some in-person interviews with the players at MSI MGA. So he did an interview with Bishop, actually, there. And I think Bishop was playing for Kongdu Panthera at the time. So anyway, the event never happened. It got cancelled, so I never ended up casting that. So the only event that I'd casted was this one, and it was an online event. So up until I got invited to cast, well, the pit, the Overwatch pit, the only thing I'd ever casted in Overwatch was some shitty online thing that I was terrible at back in June 2016. So it took me almost a year from June 2016 to April 2017 to get one casting gig to the next in Overwatch. And all the rest of that time, the whole of the rest of that year, I was just pumping out YouTube content, pumping out interviews, pumping out written articles, news articles, recaps, trying to do some, not investigative journalism, but more like just roster changes, which teams were invited to which tournaments, trying to figure out like why teams were making roster moves as well, because a lot of the time teams will give you bullshit reasons, so I was just trying to figure out like what the real reasons were, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was quite a long time between the two casting gigs, so it's also important not to kind of feel like it's not going anywhere. I would have been happy, or at least content, with just doing news stuff for a long time. And I was. So then I went to MLG Vegas, and at MLG Vegas, that was 16th to the 19th of December 2016, I think. I was doing the same kind of stuff as I was at DreamHack Winter. So I was doing in-person interviews, and I'd kind of got a formula down. So what I did was I would get the person that I was doing an interview with, say Seagull, and I would do an interview with Seagull, and then I would just do Seagull on camera without me, and I would feed him a bunch of different questions. And so the end result was I had one interview with Seagull, and then one interview on one so like the second half of the interview would be like, what do you think of Koreans or Korean dominance in Overwatch? What do you think of Ana versus Zen? What do you think of the triple tank meta? This kind of stuff. And then I'd do a whole interview on American players' thoughts on Korean dominance. And so I'd have then like 10 different people weighing in on that same topic, which I think is a really sick way of doing in-person interviews that I haven't really seen many people, apart from like Double Tap, do actually. I think that's a really great way of being able to do in-person interviews, and people aren't doing that. That's still an area that could be massively improved in Overwatch League, I think. There are some people that do interviews to a reasonable level, but a lot of the interviews are pretty surface level. You could make your name in Overwatch as a great Overwatch interviewer, honestly. And it wouldn't take you very long. If you're the kind of person that really has a good ear for it and knows how to get interesting stuff out of people. And I will say as well, actually, my time in medical school was almost entirely like all the fucking things that I struggled with in medical school were to do with talking to people. And so a lot of the stuff that I really focused on in med school was about talking to people. And the whole point of like taking a medical history is trying to drag the interesting shit out of people. So we would have lessons which were just like 3 hours of us talking to an actor who had been told not to tell us anything unless we asked the right questions. Like, that is great training for an interviewer. That's fucking great training for interviewing some scrublord player who's never been to a LAN before and is super nervous to be on camera. So that really helped, actually. They used to call it picking up on cues, but they'd have a bunch of different stuff as well. But anyway, yeah. So if you wanna learn how to do esports interviewing with tough subjects, then I would also recommend maybe looking into some how to take histories or how to approach difficult patient scenarios in med sports, med school, med sports. What the fuck are med sports? Okay. Then, all right, so from MLG Vegas, I was doing similar stuff at DreamHack Winter, and MSI MGA had fallen flat, but okay, I wasn't that bothered about it. In April, so this was in December, right? So I had all of these things going on in December. I had DreamHack Winter, then MSI MGA, then MLG Vegas. In April, that, as far as I can remember, was the next thing that I did, was this tournament called Overwatch Pit, where they had me paired with Hurix and Ask Joshi and this kind of stuff. And it was my first time that I'd really been able to flex the fact that I did actually know what the hell was going on inside the game of Overwatch. I'd been watching a bunch of streams and pro players talking about stuff, and then I'd been doing video series where I was breaking down and watching Apex and trying to think about like how the game works. And then I'd been watching a bunch of EU tournaments where teams like Cyclowns and fuck, who else was even in there at that time? The Chavs and God, Movistar Riders and some other teams like that. They had been playing and they were in this pit championship. So I knew a lot about the players because my focus had previously been like doing interviews, doing news things. So I knew about every roster change that had happened in Overwatch because I'd had to write about it. And then I knew a bit about all of the players because I'd listened to every interview that there was in Overwatch because I was trying to get better at interviewing. So just by kind of consuming a lot of content, I knew more than most people who were in a position to do like color casting at that point. And then I also knew quite a bit about the meta because I'd spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I talked about it with some players and shit about like the triple DPS meta. So yeah, I felt like I did a really good job at the Overwatch Pit. Now, whether it was a result of the Overwatch Pit or whether it was just a result of MSI MGA falling through, Blizzard asked me to cast Takeover 2. Now, I think I was not the first choice for this, but I think Mitch pushed for me to be the person that was casting there alongside Bren. I think he pushed me and Bren in to cast Takeover 2 alongside him and Jason Kaplan. I think. I might be wrong. Yeah. Okay, so Bren in my chat says, originally it was Deman with Jorasar as the casters for Takeover 2. And I think Mitch and Jason pushed back on that and said, we would much rather have Bren and Sideshow cast it, which props to them. I don't know what the fuck Bren had even casted up to this point. Bren had been casting some 1v1s and 3v3 tournaments for Esports Arena to try and get his name out there. And I think they paid him with a webcam or something, so there you go. So yeah, we were the better choice for this tournament, so they brought us in. And we did a reasonable job at Takeover 2, I think. We hadn't really casted in a while. We hadn't casted together either, because I hadn't casted with Bren since I Buy Power in June 2016, and we're talking a full year on. We hadn't been really casting TF2, and my focus hadn't been on casting. It had been on interviews and creating YouTube content and writing and stuff like that. But I still feel like we did a reasonable job at the Overwatch Pit and Takeover 2, so it seemed pretty decent. And then when I was talking to Mitch afterwards, after the event, I discussed the fact that I might prefer being on the analyst desk because I had a lot to say about all of the players. I knew the history of all of these guys. I'd be able to talk for a while. And in those days, it was the analyst desk was more a job of filling time between matches. That was like your primary raison d'etre. Whereas now, honestly, the analyst desk probably gets the least time out of anybody to be able to talk. I mean, the half times are like 4 or 5 minutes long. But yeah, it used to be a case of you just had to fill. Oh yeah, August we did the I-58 finals. You're right. We did cast some TF2. So then after we had done Takeover 2, they invited us to do Contenders. Now Contenders was kind of everyone other than Monty and Doa, honestly. Like Monty and Doa were there to give feedback, but then they were also just testing out a bunch of people. So Monty and Doa didn't actually do the casting, but instead, it was like Matt with Golden Boy, ZP with Bren, and then the desk was Reinforce, who had already had an opportunity at the World Cup to be on an analyst desk, me, and then Gil Frost. Oh, and it was Puckett as well. So Puckett had done MLG Vegas, but this was his first time hosting an analyst desk, I think, in Overwatch, because Puckett had been a caster, I think, at MLG Vegas. But maybe he did host the desk as well. I don't remember. No, Uberchain isn't Uber the caster, that's Uber Shouts. So was that a full squad? Maybe it wasn't. Actually, I think it was the full squad. I think this was everybody that was out there at thingy. And so we were all in Colorado for 7 weeks. Puckett did host at MLG. Okay. So we were all in Colorado for 7 weeks. So, no, wait, Mitch must have been there as well, was he? Was Mitch not in there? No, Mitch wasn't there. I remember. Mitch was stuck because of his visa situation. He was stuck in Germany. Right? I'm not going crazy. Am I going crazy? Yeah, I don't think Mitch did cast content, did he? He was stuck in Germany. So this was the squad. So we all hung out together. Made friends with Matt and Puckett. Met Gil Frost for the first time. Made friends with Johnny as well. We went fucking hiking and camping with ZP, which was always a laugh. And then Golden Boy was kind of jumping in and out a little bit. Who was flying in and out? I think that was Matt that was flying in and out. Maybe that was Golden Boy. I can't exactly remember. Oh yeah, Mitch came on the desk for the last week when I went to Tip of the Hats. That's true. Maybe it was Golden Boy that flew. But this was like, there was a lot of people here who were going to be involved in OWL, I'm sure. But I don't know when they made the decision on when these people were going to be involved in OWL. Gil Frost was there because he was running the event, presumably. I don't 100% know, but his company, or he worked for the company that was running the event, so he was one of the analysts that was involved. I think they were wondering whether Golden Boy would be involved in casting or desk hosting or something, and obviously Golden Boy has been working on the Overwatch League. Matt, I think they knew was going to be casting with Mitch for a long time, and I think they were trying out kind of, and Puckett, I'm sure they knew that Puckett was going to be hosting the desk, but I think they were trying out, like, us four as well, and trying to find, like, was Hex not there? Did Hex not do Contenders? I thought Hex was there as well. I guess he didn't. Hex casted with JCap. Oh, yes. Yeah, that was the other thing. So Hex and JCap flew in and were at the same place as us, doing the China coverage. So Hex and JCap had a terrible sleep schedule, and they were casting something different. So we didn't hang out with Hex and JCap as much, but we hung out with them a bit. And I think they were testing all of these people to see if they would work in OWL and how the duos worked and stuff like that. But I had no expectations of that. I was just happy to be involved in Contenders. So I was fully expecting to be invited back for the next season of Contenders in Europe, maybe, or something like that. And I thought maybe I'd get into like Overwatch League Season 2. Then at the end of Contenders, when I was at Contenders, they asked me if I'd like to be, if I was interested in OWL on the desk with Brent. Mitch and Matt were an OWL duo as early as first World Cup. Okay, so there you go. They already had Mitch and Matt locked the fuck in. But yeah, and then they asked if I'd like to be involved in OWL. So, and then from 2018 onwards, I've been in OWL. But the key part is, if you're looking to get into esports, it's this period here that's the most important. Like, all of this shit was just the after effect, was just persistence. But this that I tried to put in brackets and failed, this shit is the most important stuff. Like, actually just getting some experience casting, getting some experience writing, getting some experience with logistics of how esports runs, getting some experience with how money is made in esports, and what other people who make content, how their brains work, what they think about, how they got into it, how they got better. and then just producing content and getting better at the content as well. Like, it's no good just vomiting shit out into the world if you're not getting better at it too. You have to constantly be getting better. But I did get lucky. Like, I got lucky to even be involved in a scene that you would be able to get casting experience in, for sure. But I mean, you can still do that in Overwatch. I got lucky that when I got kicked out of uni, I still had enough money to be able to support myself, and then I could just dedicate all of my time for like 8 months while I was slowly getting poorer and poorer into finding a job. I got lucky as well that over.gg was actually offering a paid job, although my income was like literal poverty line in the UK. You know, it wasn't enough to pay my rent, but it was at least some money so that I could continue this period of at least being self-sustainable to some degree. And then when I moved back in with my parents, I carried on doing this as well. And then what else did I get lucky doing? Do you know what? Honestly, like the invited to do casting and stuff was more based on this stuff that I'd done in the past. That wasn't just some blind luck that I got picked out of nowhere. But it was really lucky that Over.gg was hiring at the time, because no other websites were in a position for me to like make, honestly, that much money at all. Having said that, there are websites now that you can write for and earn quite a bit of money. Maybe not quite a bit, but like more than I was earning on Over.gg. I mean, Over.gg itself still pays writers. I think more than I used to get as well. Gamehouse. What else? There are some other websites. I can't even remember what they are. The Daily Dot used to. I don't know whether they still do. OverwatchLeague.com, which might sound silly, but there are a lot of people from the community that write for OverwatchLeague.com that it's not a ridiculous ambition to write for that website. They do just like good pieces. Also, because you can just write a piece and then pitch it to OverwatchLeague.com and see if they want to buy it. That's also a way that journalism works. Yeah, Oplayed got picked up for the Daily Dot and then recommended me for his position when he left as well, but I didn't get it. So there you go. Probably a good thing, though. So there you go. So, but the most important thing is you need to do all of this shit where you build a resume and build skills, and then you need to wait for another esports title to come out. Essentially. Or you get so good at those skills that you can break into an already existing one. But by far and away, the easiest way of doing it is just finding a new esport that comes out. Because new esports come out all the time. Like, if you had gone from doing a shit ton of stuff in Overwatch and then tried to get into, I don't know, I remember somebody did this recently, actually. They'd done a load of stuff in Overwatch and then tried to make it in another game, but I can't remember what the game was. I don't know. I can't remember. Anyway, thank you for the diagram, Sideshow. I've been looking to get into esports myself, so it's helpful to see the steps I need to take in order to get there. Any recommendations for how to go about getting kicked out of uni? Yeah, of course, Georgetown. I would recommend doing something horrifically unethical and potentially illegal, and you'll get booted out of uni very easily. Yeah, Nate Nanza, that's who it was. I remember now. Nate Nanza built up the resume in Overwatch and went to Fortnite. Jesus Christ. So, yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Because if you've still got questions, I need to put them in this video so that everyone's questions will be answered. Otherwise, it's a pointless video if it hasn't answered anything. But I mean, those are the classic steps. Where's the video of me, Brennan Harsher, in the shower? That's on my Twitter somewhere, actually, Archer Cartridge. Are you one of those people who's generally speaking asked to do things? What is my drive like? At med school, no. I would never attend lectures, did not want to do anything, never studied for stuff, didn't like it. But I liked esports so much and got inspired by people like Thorin who just pump fucking content out all the time that I looked at the people in esports and I was like, why could I not do that or even do it better? Like, there's nothing stopping me from being able to do what they do. Uh, there's no qualification that I need to have. It's just, all I need to do is get good and make shit. And even if I didn't get noticed by anybody else, I could still be happy that I was doing it as good as they were. So that was my motivation there. And, yeah, and that, I mean, if your drive isn't there, you aren't going to make it in esports, because you have to do a bunch of shit without getting paid. That's just how esports works at the moment. There isn't enough money to instantly jump into a well-paid job unless you already have a bunch of experience from, I don't know, from your own job, you know? Like, if you previously worked as a journalist, then, okay, you can find a journalist job in Overwatch, probably. Or some other similar thing where you're working as an interviewer or working as whatever. But if you are, like I was at the beginning here, some nobody that just wants to get involved, which most people are when they ask me, then you need to spend some time just developing the skills, and you have to have the drive to actually be able to do it. And if you don't have the drive, you probably don't want it that much. You probably don't enjoy it that much. Do I need to finish my bachelor's in journalism to get into esports? No, but if you're doing it, it's a good idea to stick with it. I wish I still had my degree. I wish I hadn't been kicked out of uni and had my degree. Now, I would have finished my degree. Let me think. So when I got kicked out of uni, what the fuck was it? I think the end of 2016 would have been the end of my 4th year. So the end of 2017 would have been my 5th year. So honestly, I wouldn't have been able to go to like this. So honestly, maybe I wouldn't be here right now if I had also done my degree. But it would have been much safer. Like, much safer. This obviously was not deliberate. I did not get deliberately kicked out of university. But I didn't mind it that much because I was really preferred doing esports stuff. But do you think we might see a degree in esports journalism the same way we see sports journalism? Why not just do sports journalism at Eco Games? Why would you limit yourself to esports journalism when esports and sports work very similarly, and sports journalism will be far better for you? If you want to work in esports journalism, then by all means, take a sports journalism degree. But that isn't going to be the best way of actually getting a job in esports. Or rather, it's not going to be the fastest way of getting a job in esports. Jobs in esports are still super wide open. They're so much easier because you don't have to have qualifications. When did I meet Bren? I met Bren probably around this time. This was Bren. This was the advent of Bren. Because I think I casted with Bren on his first cast. I'd already done maybe a year or two of casting. Maybe only a year by the time I did my first cast with Bren. Discovered Bren. That's true. Discovered. I mean, that one isn't as ridiculous as Discovered CSGO. But there you go. Discovered Bren. Yeah. Yeah, always do esports and your degree or your school or whatever simultaneously, or your job. Do them at the same time. You can do esports as a hobby and still get good. You don't have to go crazy. Like, I went kind of crazy. But even if I hadn't gone crazy, I would have been able to do enough news articles in my spare time to be able to put my name out there. I could have done that. It would have been much more difficult, I'll admit. It would have been hard work. But I enjoyed doing esports stuff, so it never feels like work. I mean, streaming now doesn't feel like work. Fucking doing D&D and doing podcasts doesn't feel like work. Sometimes the Overwatch League feels like work because those are some long fucking days. Those are 10.5-hour days of having to have pretty much pure focus the entire time. That's exhausting. But a lot of my other stuff that I do on the side doesn't feel like work. It just feels like fun because I enjoy esports and I like Overwatch and this kind of shit. When did I meet Harsha? I met Harsha doing esports journalism about this time, just before after I joined over.gg, I think. I think this was Harsha. Somewhere around there. You don't need a degree. All I'm saying is, if you wanted to get a specific degree, then why not do sports writing? If you already kind of want to do sports as well, like if your real passion is journalism, not esports, then do a sports journalism degree or something like that. Why not? And then if it works out for you, then you go into sports journalism and this kind of stuff, or you just go into the wider journalism world, or you can start making esports content. Sure. Just simply, honestly though, just being able to write is a huge talent. There are a lot of people that can't write very well. And honestly, being able to write has earned me thousands of dollars in esports. And most of that has come from, well, all of that has come from this point onwards. But last year I earned a couple thousand because just from writing, because the OverwatchLeague.com pays pretty well. Very well, actually. And outside sponsors like Intel, for example, if they want somebody to write an article, they will come to somebody they think is an expert, and they will, and just by having your name out there and having written other stuff, and then they will pay very well. Like, individual sponsors will pay very well for the expertise of people within the business. That's really how you make a lot of money. Not that I have made a lot of money, or am even very knowledgeable about that kind of stuff. I'm actually fairly shit at networking and being able to, like, sell myself to sponsors like that, but occasionally they approach me. I did my master's in sports administration, and I just got a job as a college esports director. What's the likelihood of being able to take that experience into the managerial side of professional esports? I would say if your schedule allows for it, college esports isn't really a road into esports proper. College esports is like a weird tangential thing that doesn't really link at the moment, but it's great experience. And if you wanted to work as a manager for a team, then you could certainly apply for a managerial position for like an academy team in tier 2, or some team that doesn't really have a manager, some team that doesn't have sponsorship but is looking to join an academy team or something like that. You would probably be working without pay if you joined one of those tier 2 teams, but the players would really appreciate it, and they would recommend you for future positions if they got signed to a team and this kind of stuff. These are all the kind of ways of how you try and turn experience into a job on, say, an Overwatch League team. People are unlikely to pick you up for an Overwatch League team if you don't have experience managing at least a tier 2 team, like a team in Contenders, because you need to know what regular scrim schedules are like, and working with players and liaising with like sponsor requirements, and being able to just fucking herd cats essentially as well. Oh yeah, and I also did like a bunch of, the whole time that I was in university as well, from maybe, because Baby Blue just asked about this too, the whole time I was in university from maybe 2014 to 2016, I was involved in comedy, improv, and review sketch groups, which were pretty decent. We performed at the Edinburgh Fringe 2015, 2016, I think, if I remember the dates correctly. And that kind of experience is great for just being able to talk on camera and this kind of stuff, and just be like a kind of outgoing personality. But nothing is as good as talking as is making YouTube videos. If you can make YouTube videos and watch your YouTube videos back and not cringe, and keep making YouTube videos to the point where you think now that you're kind of a decent speaker on camera, like, that is what really does it, because speaking to a camera is the majority of esports. Like, there are not that many times where you are on stage. Most of the time you're speaking to a camera. So there you go. What else? I'm a Reddit papega, but I know life keep up with Overwatch esports, and I have done since 2016. I can also write decently. Where would I go to try making written esports content? Okay, here's the other thing. You never need to be attached to anything. This is something that I haven't really talked about. You don't need to be attached to an over.gg or a YouTube channel or whatever. You should, if you are trying to make your own content in esports, you should make a YouTube channel. You should make a Twitter. You should also make a medium to write on. Then you should be attempting to... So Reddit has... Oh, this is a whole new fucking kettle of fish. Reddit has a 9-to-1 algorithm. These are the kind of things you'll learn if you watch a bunch of fucking esports content from the masters, from the people that have been doing this since the advent of Reddit. It's all really simple stuff, but it's stuff that brand new people wouldn't know. Is that Reddit has a 9-to-1 rule where you have to submit 9 pieces of someone else's content before you can submit one of your own. Otherwise, it's counted as like you're promoting yourself too much. So unless you work with a group of other people, where you're working in a website and you know that your content is going to get posted no matter what. Like, I know that my content, if it's good enough, will kind of get posted. I don't really have to worry about self-promotion at this point. But when I was starting, you fucking bet your ass this 9-to-1 rule was like my golden ratio. I was trying to promote other people's content, and I don't just mean making like shit posts and spam for this 9. Like, this 9 has to be quality content. So you want to find like clips of other people's streams that you think are interesting, interviews that you find around the place, like written articles by Yiska or Volumel or these kind of people that are still very homebrewed within the scene, and you want to try and post that on Reddit. And once you have 9 posts on Reddit, you can post one of your best pieces that can come from your YouTube or your Medium to be able to write from, or whatever other medium you want to use, if you pardon the terrible pun. It's not even really a pun, but that's the whole reason they called the site Medium. You want to try and put your work out there and promote it on Twitter and ask other people to read it and mention it and stuff. Like Formation, for example. I don't know when Formation started writing, but I only knew Formation from my chat. And when he messaged me on Twitter with some written stuff, I was like, fuck, this shit's actually really good. So then I retweet it. The amount of people that spam me with shit that's crap, I get it all the time. I don't tend to retweet it. But I will read most of the stuff that people send to me in DMs because I'm interested if it's something good. And if it is something good, I will retweet it. And most people will. Like, that's the whole reason that I like things like oversight and just being on like podcasts and this kind of shit and making connections within the space. Guys like Thorin work on this principle so much that if they see shit that they think is good, they will retweet it and they will promote it because they know that that's the best way of like up and coming people being able to get coverage. So the people that make content are really desperate for other people to make content. Nobody is sat here in like an ivory tower like, this person has written an interview piece which is too good. It is threatening my position on the throne. Let me make sure that he never gets a spot in esports ever again. A lot of people who make content in esports are desperate for other people who are good at making content in esports. I wish we got some kick-ass interviews in Overwatch for Overwatch League, because then I would use quotes from them all the time on the desk. I'd love to do that. We'd love to feature that kind of shit. Most of the interviews in Overwatch League are fairly fucking basic. They don't really have that much juicy info. But if there was awesome stuff like that, or if there were podcasts like Alt Advantage that Dogman tried to make, where it was a couple of players that were chatting through stuff, or if somebody made like an oversight that was regular that had players on it and you were able to get like juicy snippets, then people would be interested because those things have value in and of themselves. And yeah, I've seen some of Mineral's stuff. Mineral's been producing great content. The problem is YouTube videos are way more difficult for somebody like me to watch all the way through. I will read an article, no problem. I won't watch the entirety of your 20-minute YouTube video, which I know is dumb for me to say because I put out 20 fucking 40-minute YouTube videos all the time. But also, my target audience is not as busy as me, and like, I don't want to say that in the sense that, I don't know, that sounds bad, but I have a full-time job, but I also spend my off time making those videos. I don't spend my off time consuming those videos. So I'm in like a different situation, right? Like, I'm trying to consume as much good shit as I can, but I don't have time to consume everything anymore because I'm still producing my own stuff. So I'm in a slightly different position to most people who are esports fans who have full-time jobs, some of whom will work way more than I will, but then in their off time, they listen to stuff. They don't make stuff. So they can listen to those like 20-minute videos. Anyway, so yes, I have actually heard of Spylo, Neptune Overwatch. I've heard of this guy Spylo because I've seen some of his clips of him breaking down plays and stuff. So that's how you get like your name out there, is making stuff on your own channels and then spreading it as much as you can by either putting it on Reddit or putting it on Twitter and saying, like, with this replay viewer, here's the thing, with the replay viewer that's now in the game, it should be easier than ever to become a name in Overwatch. Because here's what you do. Here's what you do. If you want a formula for how to become known in Overwatch, you either try and find the plays that everybody else missed just by scrutinizing the game, or you become a real special analyst at some aspect. Like, you just watch all of the VODs of Fury's POV. Like, you watch all of the VODs from Fury's POV that have ever been out there in the world, and you record them and you rewatch them, and you are able then to boil it down into a 10-minute video, which is exactly how Fury plays and why he's so good. Or like, you write an article about it. And if you just kept doing those, like I was trying to do for the, what the fuck did I even call that series? The Color of Toby, right? I had this The Color of series. You should be able, anyone that has like an analytical brain around Overwatch and the time to be able to do it should be able to make these kick-ass videos with the replay viewer. Like, kick-ass videos. They should be so good. So go do it. If you go do it and they're fucking good, you'll bang. You'll be able to make a name for yourself pretty easily. Yeah, I know I made one video. It was supposed to be a video series, but the problem is, back in the day, those took so long to make because I had to watch maybe 8 hours of VODs from the observer point of view to try and find like where Toby was on the screen and see if he was doing anything interesting, then bookmark them all and then go back over it and collate it into a video. Now, when you have the replay viewer, you can just sit on Fury's POV, so he doesn't even have to be on the screen. And you can always see whether he's doing something interesting or not. So that should honestly, you should only have to watch maybe 3, I would say, you watch 3 good games of Fury, you should have enough for a real kick-ass video. So, I think, potentially. I mean, like, any hot take you have, like, someone's just come out with a hot take in my chat. Janus isn't bad, he just has a shit team. VOD review of Janus last match, Decay walked into 4 people, VOD, yada, yada, yada. All you have to do is make a video of you saying, Janus is not a feeder, and here's 10 minutes of why, and you compare his decision-making to a Ryan that people think is really good, and explain how it's his team letting him down all the time, and that video would bang on Reddit. Or at least if it was good, I would retweet it, and I would try and promote it as much as possible, because that's the kind of cool shit that should be created with the replay viewer. Tell you what as well, if anybody's out there who is a fucking frag movie maker from like TF2 or CSGO or any of that kind of shit, bro, you could make a YouTube career out of that shit. Do you know how much money's available on YouTube if you are actually able to produce sick frag movies? And you now have just a wealth of Overwatch footage, and nobody's ever made good frag movies in Overwatch before. Sorry, it's never happened. There are some frag movies that are okay, that are fairly entertaining, but they're not from high-stakes matches. They don't have that same kind of coordination with them because they're just from scrims or ranked, or not even from scrims, they're just from ranked most of the time, or from people's streams. Snizzle Noses was fucking sick. Actually, I will take that back. Snizzle Noses Roadhog movies were fantastic. But anyway, yeah, you could make banging videos. Like, the door is wide open. Even in Overwatch, I've been saying find a new game, but honestly, you could still try and make a name for yourself in Overwatch. And let's be real, it may take a year for you to be in a position where you're making decent or any money out of it, or be in like a paid position. But what the fuck are you doing at the moment? Do you need a job? If you need a job desperately, you should go out and find a job. But if you're looking to get into esports, you got no time to start like the present. There you go.